Hi, I'm George Cook, the initiator of the Awarelogue initiative, and we are extremely happy to be partnering with the Embassy of France in Sri Lanka as we commemorate yet another annual event organized by the French government. This annual event, known as the Night of Ideas, focuses on key issues affecting stakeholders, affecting people around the world. And this year in Colombo, the focus is on the death penalty. In terms of considering the death penalty, inviting speakers who have expertise and experience in this particular field, who are going to be sharing their views on the death penalty in the country and around the world. We're extremely happy to be partnering with Institut français, which is the main organizing institution back in France, which is responsible for the commemoration of this annual event.
Hi, my name is Thiagi Ruan Patirana. I'm a researcher with Amnesty International with their South Asia office based in Colombo.
My name is Ambika Satgunanathan. I am a human rights advocate. I was a former commissioner of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka, where I led the first ever study of prisons, where we also studied the plight of persons on death row in Sri Lanka.
Hello, my name is Bronwyn Dudley, and I'm the Program Manager at the World Coalition Against the Death Penalty. The World Coalition Against the Death Penalty is a member-based collective whose primary mandate is to see the universal abolition of capital punishment.
In Sri Lanka in 2019, former President Maithripala Sirisena proposed the resumption of execution for persons on death row for drug offences. And at that time, because Sri Lanka has had a moratorium on the death penalty since 1976, and because of that perhaps that there hasn't been much discussion or discourse on the abolition of the death penalty. But when the former president proposed the resumption of executions in 2019, there were many fundamental rights petitions filed in the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka challenging the president's decision. The Supreme Court gave an interim order which to date stands, and the court is still under hearing. But since then, regrettably, there hasn't been much civil society action or efforts made to capitalize on the momentum that the president's decision generated at the time. So I think a lot of work still needs to be done, particularly by civil society, advocating for the abolition of the death penalty.
The World Coalition Against the Death Penalty leads numerous programs against capital punishment, and we work to support the activities and actions of our members as well. However, a large campaign that the World Coalition leads every year is the World Day Against the Death Penalty, which happens on the 10th of October. The campaign is a global awareness event that unifies the abolitionist community and aims to mobilize civil society, political leaders, and public opinion in support of universal abolition. Every year, the theme of the World Day focuses on a different social or legal perspective of the death penalty that really addresses the cruel and archaic practice of capital punishment. In 2022, the 20th World Day Against the Death Penalty will focus on the link between torture and capital punishment.
So at Amnesty International, the death penalty is an area we work on quite a bit globally. There's an annual report on the death penalty where we collate information of death sentences and executions that have happened around the world. And at the South Asia office, we've been responding to issues of the death penalty. For example, when there are executions that were lined up, for example, in Sri Lanka in 2019, in Pakistan with blasphemy cases. So as a responsive, reactive piece of work, that's something we are very keen to work on. And I think overall, because of the campaign against the death penalty, more and more countries are moving towards an abolitionist status, and that's great. I think there's success.
The most important perspective when combating the death penalty is a really straightforward one, to encourage a state to fully abolish the death penalty. Moratoriums on executions are crucial and fundamental places to start, but that is by no means where the combat to the death penalty should end. Full abolition of the death penalty for all crimes is the most important step to take. The next step would be solidifying that commitment to abolition by ratifying and adopting regional and international treaties that further prohibit the use of the death penalty. There are many regional treaties, but the place that we always recommend to start is by ratifying and adopting the second optional protocol to the UN's International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights.
In South Asia, almost all countries still have the death penalty in the books, even though it could be that it's a moratorium in principle, or they don't practice the death penalty or execute people. So it's still retentionist in practice, and that's what we want to try and achieve, that all the countries achieve abolition status, because based on different political ideologies, based on political reasons, rulers that come into government and power may choose to execute people, and we want to make sure that it doesn't come to that. So that's why we work towards the abolition of death penalty altogether.
I would say the next steps would be the abolition of the death penalty by the government. And of course, in that regard, I think civil society and various other stakeholders, including the United Nations and the international community, need to advocate and put pressure, but particularly civil society, because I think it is something that affects the citizens of Sri Lanka, and as such, civil society needs to create greater awareness to also generate public outcry or public discourse against the death penalty.